Koyach, koyach. A good Chodesh. We're entering the month of Elul. It's an awesome month. The preparation for Rosh Hashanah, for Yom Kippur. But to appreciate the specialness of the month, we know, of course, that Rosh Tevis, one of the famous Rosh Tevis for Elul, is Ani l'Deidi v'Deidi li. So in one pasuk it says, Deidi li v'Ani loi, that the Eibishter reaches out to me and I respond to him. But Elul is Ani l'Deidi v'Deidi li, that first we do tshuva, we call out to the Eibishter, and the Eibishter responds to us. That's the difference between the month of Elul and the month of Nisan. Nisan, which is the month of Pesach, we were not in a condition to call out to the Eibishter. We were in the Memtes Shari Tuma, but the Eibishter came, B'chvei Va'atzmei, he came down to Mitzrayim and he took us out. And of course we responded. Lech teich acharei b'midbar. But the month of Elul, which is a hachana, a preparation for Tishrei, Tishrei is the Aveda of tshuva, that we have to do tshuva, and then the Eibishter responds. The Alter Rebbe gave a famous mashal. What is the month of Elul? Usually the king is in the palace and you can't get to him. You have to have protectia, you have to know somebody who knows somebody in order to get into the palace. But in the month of Elul, HaMelech, the king, comes out basodeh. HaMelech basodeh. The king comes out into the fields where the people are working and welcomes them, inspires them to come to the palace. So the question is, how do these two things fit together? If the month of Elul is Ani l'Deidi and then Deidi li, so how does it fit with the mashal that the king comes out to the people working in the fields to encourage them? So it's starting from the Eibishter. The Melech is doing it, not the people. So here is this really beautiful lesson. Why does the Melech come out to the field? It's not like a president campaigning for an election. The Melech comes out to the field because he knows that the people in the field want to come to the palace. They want to do tshuva. They want to be what a Jew is supposed to be. But they're discouraged because they're field people. They're not dressed for Yom Tov. They're not ready for Yom Tov. They don't feel like they're entitled to come into the palace. But because they want to, and the king knows that they want to, that inspires the king to come out to the field and tell the people that they can do what they want to do. They can come to the palace, they are welcome. No special yichus is necessary. The way you are, you can come into the palace. The Rebbe connects this also with a very emotional. The pasuk says, with a naira hamurosa, that if she was attacked in the city, then she is guilty. But im basode mitza'ena. But if it was in the sode, like the melech basode, then she is innocent. Why? Because tzoako hanaira ve'ein moishialo. Tzoako Hanaira, that's the neshama. The Medrash, the Zohar, refers to the neshama as a naira, as a daughter. So Tzoako Hanaira, the neshama wants, the neshama cries, it wants to be what it's supposed to be, but Ein Meshiach, nobody hears, because it's Basada. So Chassidus says, not Ein Meshiach, but Ayin Moshiach. The Eibishter, who we can't understand, and therefore called Ayin, Yesh Me'ayin. Ayin Meshiach. Only the Eibishter hears her crying, and he comes and he. That's the Melech Basodeh, that when the neshama feels that nobody's listening, because it's a Sodeh neshama. But the Eibishter does hear, and the Melech, the Eibishter, comes out to the Sodeh to tell you that you are welcome, that you should come, and you don't need any special protection. Protectia. So that's the month of Elul, which leads us to the topic tonight. There's a big issue, a big question. The mitzvahs that we do, are they l'tzeirich goveya? Is it because the Eibishter needs the mitzvah? Or is it l'tzeirich ha'odam l'tzaref behemes habriyos? And there are proofs, there are psukim that indicate that it's l'tzeirich goveya, but then there are psukim that indicate that it's only l'tzeirich ha'odam. In the Gemara, there are different opinions. In Mishnah, all sorts of quotes that seem to go both ways. For example, mitzvahs lav lehenes nitna. If the mitzvah is all for my benefit, what do you mean lav lehenes? It's not given for my enjoyment. It's all for my enjoyment. We're talking about real enjoyment, not silly. Le nitnu ha-mitzvahs elo l'tzarev be'emes habriyos. On the other hand, how are the mitzvahs good for the person? Why are they good for the person? Because they serve a purpose, l'tzeirich goveya, and when you do something, l'tzeirich goveya, of course it's going to have a positive effect on you. For example, the Mishnah says, you shouldn't be like an Eved that serves Almenas L'Kabel Pras, you should be like the Eved that serves Shalei Almenas L'Kabel Pras. Yeah? So it's obvious, the obvious question is, what does it mean? Be like a servant who serves without, what do you need the whole mushal for? Why don't you just say, don't do a mitzvah for the sake of a reward? But the Mishnah is making a whole mushal. You have an Eved, and he has an Odin, and he can either serve the Odin Almanas L'Kabel Pras or Shalei Almanas L'Kabel Pras. I think there's actually a girs in the Mishnah, not Shalei Almanas L'Kabel Pras, not for the reward, but Almanas Shalei L'Kabel Pras. Makes it even stronger. Dafkin, no reward. So, what is the purpose of the mashal? So it could be very simply, if you say don't do mitzvahs for the reward, and you go according to the opinion that the mitzvahs are not necessary, l'tzeirich goveya, the Eibishter doesn't need the mitzvah, and now you're being told not to do it for the reward, then why are you doing it? If it's not for your benefit, and it doesn't benefit him, so what are you doing? So the Mishnah has to give a moshel. There's an Odin, and the Eved serves the Odin. The Eved does what the master needs. Otherwise, the only reason to do it would be for the reward. So if he's doing it without a reward, what does that mean? The fact that he can do something that the Odin, that his master needs, that's enough reward. He doesn't need any more than that. So that shows that the mitzvah is l'tzedek govea, for the Eibishter's purpose. You can resolve this conflict. It's both. It's half and half. It's not only l'tzedek govea. It's not only for the Eibishter. It's also for you. It's not only for you. It's also for the Eibishter. You can work out these contradictions. But listen to the significance of this issue. Traditionally, being religious, being frum, was not just behavior. It was an internal process. Kabbalas Elul, you accept the yoke of heaven, you devote yourself to the mitzvahs, you sacrifice, you give up comfort, you give up all sorts of pleasures in order to be frum. This is called frum. Frum means you make yourself a better person. You develop good qualities. You give up on your kavod and you overlook your insults and you... It's making you the best person you can be. That's called frum. So frum, in the best sense, is a self-development project where you mold yourself into the most noble, to the most edel, to the most devoted, to the most sacrificing, selfless human being. You have to do mitzvahs b'kavona. You have to be a true Baal Chesed. You have to enjoy helping another person. All sorts of qualities that the average human being would not develop. On the contrary, more gaiva, more personal, more selfish, more... So frum is a very, very intense project, and that is to make a human being into something special. That's called frum. What is Yiddishkeit? Yiddishkeit means it doesn't really matter whether you are the best person, the nicest person, the worst person. It's not about you. It's not about you. The Eibishter created a world, and the Eibishter chose the Jewish people and gave us a mission. And we have to fulfill the mission. If it helps to become a better person, if that will help the mission, then it's important. If not, it's not important. So let me ask a practical question. Are we supposed to be more generous so that we will give tzedakah? Or do we give tzedakah in order to become a more generous person? You see, here's the difference between doing a mitzvah because the Eibishter asked, or doing a mitzvah because it makes me a better person. Do you give tzedakah? You should give tzedakah every single day. Why? It'll develop your character. You'll become a more generous person. The feelings follow the actions. So if you give the tzedakah every day, the act will develop within you, cultivate within you a greater sense of generosity. So you will become a Baal Chesed. If you give tzedakah, you will become a better person. Or is it the opposite? If it'll help you to give tzedakah by becoming more generous, then become more generous. As long as it leads to giving tzedakah. Because the main thing is that you give the tzedakah. It's interesting that Priyas Chayiv is a mitzvah. It is a mitzvah to pay off your debt. You borrowed money, it's a mitzvah to pay back. What does it mean it's a mitzvah? This is really, really interesting. It's not your money. So of course you have to give it back. What do you mean it's a mitzvah? Somebody gives you a mashkin. Somebody gives you an article to hold for him. And when he comes to collect it, you remember that he owes you money. Approximately the value of this article that he gave you to hold. Are you allowed to keep the article in exchange for the debt or not? Technically, you should be allowed. But lifnim mishuras hadin, you should pay it back. You should give it back. How does that make sense? It's a mitzvah. It's not a question of who ends up with the money and the Torah is trying to protect the loive that he should get his money back. No. It is a mitzvah to pay a debt, which means the Eibishter needs you to do this. Not because the guy deserves to have his money back. It's not yesher. It's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. So, being frum can sometimes become an end in itself. You become a better person, you become a more noble person, you become a more edel person, you become a more impressive human being. That's good. What does it have to do with Yiddishkeit? Even when we talk about the tzaddikim, the gedolim of the past generations, they were so kind, they were so strong, they were so honest, they were so... Okay, it's nice. Where's the Yiddishkeit? So if the frum is starting to take over and it's becoming an end in itself, then we are losing sight of our purpose. The purpose in creating the world is not so that you should be a good person. And what is the raya? The raya is very simple. Bereshis bora elikim es hashamayim ve'es ha'aretz. Bereshis. Before you were here, before you had self-improvement ambitions, Bereshis. In the beginning, it starts with the Eibishter. He created the world. So, what should we be asking? We should be asking, what does he want? If he created the world, what does he want? That we should become better people. That's after we're born. And we have a Yetzer Hara. And we have some weaknesses in our character. Okay, you have to fix it. But you can't say that that is Bereshis. So what is the beginning? The beginning is he created the world. What does he want? And that's why the Medrash, right on the first word of Bereshis, says Bishvil Yisrael shenikra Reishis or Bishvil HaTorah shenikra Reishis. What is the first comment, the first reaction to Bereshis Bora Elikim? The first reaction is, what does he want? And the answer is, he wants Eden and he wants Torah and Mitzvahs. Bishvil Yisrael, Bishvil HaTorah. It seems like with each generation, each later generations, the earlier generations were like angels then we are like human beings. If they were like human beings, we are like animals. When it comes to self-improvement, when it comes to personal talents, we can't compare to earlier generations. We will never have the qualities that they had, because that was the time of preparing the vessel, of preparing the world by refining the world, by refining the human condition, so that it can live up to its mission and purpose. What is today? Today, before the coming of Mashiach, it's not so much what kind of a person we become, how great we can be. Now it's the finishing touches. The purpose for which the Eibishter created the world, now is time for that to happen, to be fulfilled. And it's all summed up in a simple sentence: Ani le'nevresi elo l'shamish eskaini. The whole world was created to serve me. Adam, when he was created, the whole world was ready. Everything was created before him. Why? Because all of that was created to serve me, to give me the opportunity to do what I was created for. And Ani le'nevresi elo l'shamish eskaini. I was created to serve my Creator. Question is, why does it say I was not created except to serve my Creator? Why not say it in the positive? I was created to serve. So what is the le'nevresi for? It's telling us something amazing, something earth-shattering, that the world does not really appreciate or understand yet. Ani le'nevresi. If you're talking about me, what am I? How good am I? How special am I? How smart am I? Le'nevresi. Ani, for my purpose, I don't need to be created at all. Or as the Mishnah says, Bal korcha chata noilad, Bal korcha chata chai, Bal korcha chata. You're born against your will, you live against your will, and then you die against your will. In other words, it's not about you. You don't want to be born, you don't want to live, because you don't need this. Ani le'nevresi. If it was a question of me, then better not to be born. Elo. So why am I born? V'shamish eskaini. So it's saying very clearly, I don't need this. So if I'm here, the world is created, it does exist, then it must be l'shamish eskaini. Because I don't need this, we don't need this, so who needs? The Creator, obviously. He created the world. Obviously, He wants something, needs something from His world. And because He needs it, when I do the mitzvah, which is His mitzvah, of course it makes me a better person. How can it not? Of course it makes me more edel. Of course it makes me more holy. It's His mitzvah. I'm doing something for Him. How can that not have a positive effect? So it is refining. It does bring me closer to Him because He really needs it. I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but it's a very good illustration. We say that the word mitzvah is related to the word tzafsa v'chibur. When you do a mitzvah, it connects you to God, connects you to the Eibishter. So imagine a mother asks her son to make her tea every day, 3 times a day. Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv. For 50 years, he makes tea for his mother. 3 times a day, every day. 4 cups on the Chodesh. At the end of 50 years, he finds out that his mother never drinks tea. Never drinks tea. She doesn't like it, she doesn't want it, she doesn't need it, she never drinks it. So he says to his mother, "My hi, what was this all about? I bring you tea for 50 years, you don't even drink it?" So the mother says, "Well, I need tea." "What do I need tea for?" "I asked you to bring me tea every day to give you an opportunity to get closer to me." It sounds nice, except one big problem. If she doesn't drink tea, and she doesn't need tea, and she doesn't like tea, and you bring her tea, are you getting closer to her? You're not. In fact, if I want to keep you out of my life, you're a nudnik, you hang around too much, and I don't want you in my life, what would I do? I would ask you to do me a favor that I don't need. Go around the corner, see if the eclipse is visible over there. That gets you closer to me. I'm keeping you out of my life. Let me show you the proof. This son, who brought his mother tea for 50 years, finds out that his mother loves coffee. She loves coffee. She asked her other son to bring her coffee. No? So now he sees the mother likes the other son, asked him to make her coffee, which is part of her life, so that when he brings her coffee, he is involved in her life, because coffee is her life. And him, the mother says, make tea, which she doesn't drink. So now the question is, what is a mitzvah? A mitzvah is like tea, or a mitzvah is like coffee? If a mitzvah is like tea, then you get a big mark and a big schar for obedience. You were told and you did. But if the mitzvah is supposed to get you close, tea doesn't get you close. It keeps you far. And the fact that you obeyed, who do you obey? Who do you obey? Somebody you can't get close to. You obey a king. He's never going to be your friend. You obey the principal. He's not friendly with anybody. So obedience comes where there is no closeness. It's a big virtue. It has its own mila. But you can't call it safsa v'chibur. It's not a connection. And again, this is why the Mishnah says, Al tiyu ka'avodim hamishamshem es harav. There has to be a rav. There has to be somebody you're serving that you're getting closer to, and then you don't need a schar. But if you're not getting closer, it means you're not really serving. So if you're not really serving, then you better do it for a schar, otherwise you have no reason to do it at all. So the simple words, Ivdu es Hashem besimcha, Ivdu es Hashem. If he doesn't need it, if he doesn't drink it, if this is tea, how do you call this Ivdu es Hashem? It's not Ivdu es Hashem. it seems like in our generation, the emphasis has to be on, is the Eibishter getting what he wants? Whether it's making you a better person, that's not so important anymore. I just heard an interesting story. And tell me how this story makes sense. Back in Russia, when the Rebbe was a little boy in Nikolaev, it was a hot day, and people were starting to become communists, and so a lot of Jews were a little bit estranged from Yiddishkeit. So the Rebbe was 3 years old. He was wearing a yarmulke. So somebody came over to him, an adult, and said, "Ingele, it's so hot. What do you need the yarmulke for? Take off the yarmulke." So the Rebbe said, "You're not allowed." So the man said, "It's okay, the Aveda will be on me." So the Rebbe said, as a 3-year-old, the Rebbe said to him, "What's the difference who does the Aveda? If it's a sin, then it doesn't matter who does it." How does that make sense? If the whole purpose of a mitzvah is litzarev be'emes habriyos, it does make a difference who does it. If you're doing it for schar, if you're doing the mitzvahs because you want to go to Gan Eden, then of course it makes a difference whether you do it or somebody else does it. How is it possible that it doesn't make a difference who does the Aveda? What does that mean, it doesn't make a difference? It's an Aveda no matter who does it. So what does that mean? It means it goes against the Eibishter. So what's the difference? Who is doing it? You know the famous Reb Zushia and the famous quote that he's not worried when he comes to heaven. He's not worried they're going to ask him, "Why weren't you Moshe Rabbeinu? Why weren't you Avram Avinu?" He's worried that they're going to ask him, "Why weren't you Zushia?" Yeah, you know the other story. But there's another quote, also in the name of Reb Zushia. Somebody once asked him, "If you could change places, if you could be Avram Avinu, would you like to be Avram Avinu?" He said, "No." They said, "How come? You wouldn't want to be Avram Avinu?" He says, the Eibishter needs an Avram Avinu, and the Eibishter needs a Zushia. What's the difference who's who? As long as the Eibishter has an Avram Avinu and a Zushia. So what's the difference whether I'm the Zushia or I'm the Avraham? As long as the Eibishter has what he wants. That's, I think, what we need to be focusing on. So I want to tell you a personal, a little incident. We went on Shlichus, we went out to Minnesota in 1970. At that time, there was a little shul, an old shul, that was fading. It was closing up. And there were just barely a minyan of people who would come, older people. But they were amazing. So we have a minhag, which is a good minhag, by the way, that on Shabbos Mevarchim, the Shabbos before a new month, we get up a little bit earlier and we say the whole Tehillim. With the Yehirotzens, the whole... And it's good to do it with a minyan and the Kadeshim after each. So there were 3 shluchim, there were 3 Lubavitchers in the town, and we were thinking, who can we ask to join us to make a minyan? So there were 2 brothers from Poland who were the most lebedik in the group. So I went over to one of the brothers, his name was Yidel. I said, Yidel, maybe you'll come one Shabbos out of 4, and we'll say that the whole Tehillim. In Yiddish, he spoke Yiddish. He says, only one Shabbos out of 4? I said, yeah, just one. He says, why just one? Why not every Shabbos? I said, I'm not trying to start a new minhag. You want to start a new minhag? Go ahead. Our minhag is one Shabbos Mevarchim. Will you come? He says, you don't understand. My brother and I, we say the whole Tehillim every Shabbos morning. So I was a little surprised. And he said, now let me tell you what happened. We were in a concentration camp for 3 years. And then the Russians came and liberated the camp. They opened up the gates and they said, go home. And we were standing there by the gates of a concentration camp. And we didn't have a home. There was no home. There was no place to go. Leaving the concentration camp was terrifying. We didn't know what to do. We were lost. As we were standing there, completely confused, a non-Jewish woman came towards us with a big basket and handed us a fresh loaf of bread. So we shook hands and we promised each other that we're going to say that the whole Tehillim every Shabbos morning for this kindness that the Eibishter just gave us. We can't compare. They spent 3 years in a concentration camp, and they can't get over the Eibishter's kindness. I don't know about you, I cannot imagine ever being on that. How did they do that? How did they do that? It's inspiring. It's awesome. But that's not what we need to be imitating or because we can't. Those were different souls. Our job is to finish the project that started 5,777 years ago. So if we can do a mitzvah, there's no reason to hesitate. Am I on that level? Am I that frum? Am I that religious? Am I that spiritual? It's not about us. It really isn't. So if you know that there's a mitzvah that you can do, what are you hesitating for? It's like the mother didn't ask you to bring her coffee, but you know she likes coffee, so what are you waiting for? I'm not the one who was hired to make the coffee. It doesn't matter. I'll tell you a story. You know, when Jewish kids, God forbid, get caught up in Christian cults, it's almost impossible to get them out. Their brain just closes up. There's nobody to talk to. It's almost impossible. I've been doing this for years and years. Thank God there aren't as many cults anymore. But in the days, in the 70s and the 80s with the cults, it was practically impossible. You have to destroy them before they can hear a word you're saying. A father calls me, begs me to talk to his daughter who got caught up in a cult in Mississippi or something. But they lived in Minnesota, and she was home. So I said to him, look, it doesn't help. You can't. We'll just get into an argument. It'll become nasty, and nothing will come of it. He said, please, please, and they were survivors. So I said, okay, fine, let her come. She comes. I said, what are you doing with your life? So she gives me the whole spiel. So I said, I hope it's not too personal. I'm curious. Do you keep kosher? She says, you didn't understand what I said. You used to have to keep kosher. You don't anymore because you can get to heaven without it. I said, no, I understand. I'm just wondering, do you keep kosher? So she explains it again. First, there were laws. If you kept the laws, you can get into heaven. But now, since people can't keep all the laws, so now he'll get you into heaven without. I said, okay, I understand. I'm just curious. Do you, in fact, keep kosher? She explains it a third time. Till finally, she got. They never get upset. They got this smile. They're brainwashed. She got a little upset. She said, why do you keep asking me that? So I said, because it sounds like you really love God. And you know that it says in the Torah that God doesn't like non-kosher food. So I'm just wondering, I'm just curious. I know you'll get to heaven even if you don't keep kosher. I'm just wondering whether you're keeping kosher just for him. She got so disturbed, she ran out of the room. She ran to the telephone, and she called her Pesach. And she said, why don't we keep kosher just for him? And he told her something, whatever. And she came back with a smile back, the brainwashed, that's it. So I thought, okay, a waste of time, which I knew it would be a waste of time. She leaves. Later that night, I called the mother. I said, no, so what was the result? She came back with something. The mother says, she kept mumbling something about kosher. What did you tell her about kosher? So even after her Pesach told her that she doesn't have to keep kosher, it got into her, under her skin. Taki, why don't you keep kosher? So it's a strange moshel to come from, but this is the point. Today, whether you get to heaven or not, that's not the question. If you know that the Eibishter wants a certain mitzvah, and you have 5 minutes and you can do that mitzvah, why would you not do it? What are you waiting for? That you should become a better person? I mean, can you imagine somebody knocks on your door and says, please, I'm hungry. Do you have something to give me? And you say, I would love to give you, but I'm not that generous yet. I'm working on it. You come back in a couple of weeks. I'll be more ready for you. This is ridiculous, no? So if you have an opportunity to do a mitzvah, what reason is there to hesitate? I'm not that frum? We all know that. Because you're not that frum. So now, going back to the topic, in the question of frum versus Yiddishkeit, the balance in the world today is that the Yiddishkeit has to come first. And if the frum is getting in the way, it's not good. It's not good. The Rebbe told this college student who was going back after Tishrei, he was going back to campus. So the Rebbe said to him, when you get back to the campus, remind your friends to put on tefillin. So he said, the Rebbe, I don't put on tefillin. And the Rebbe said, it's not their fault. Why should they suffer? I didn't ask you if you put on tefillin. You have friends, they need to put on tefillin. So remind them. The fact that you're not a perfect Jew yet, okay. You know, we have this thing called the internet. I don't know if you heard about it. It's the best and it's the worst. But because of it, there are people who are doing mitzvahs that we will never know about. They're not frum. But they heard something on the internet that you're supposed to, and they're doing it. It's an amazing thing. The internet has no limits. Anyone, anywhere, anytime, any subject, Same is true with Yiddishkeit. A Jew, anytime, anywhere, no matter what, he finds out that there's a mitzvah, there's no reason to hesitate. It is l'tzorech govea. I want to end with a little story. I was invited to speak in Argentina years ago. It means flying from Minneapolis to New York, Miami, Miami to Chile or something, and from Chile to... It was not a comfortable flight. So by the time I landed, it was 12 hours. By the time I landed, I was miserable. I can't sleep on a plane. So what happens? The shliach there picks me up at the airport, takes me to a hotel, I recover, and then we spend a week working. So I'm looking forward to the hotel room. He picks me up, we're in the car, we're driving, and he says, there's a woman who suffered a terrible tragedy. She's very depressed, severely depressed. She hasn't left her apartment in 6 months, doesn't want to talk to anybody. And she finally agreed to speak to you. And we made an appointment, so we'll stop on the way to the hotel room. We'll stop at her apartment, and you'll talk to her. I was not happy. In fact, I was quite upset. She's already depressed 6 months. It has to be on the way to the hotel room. All of a sudden, it's an emergency. And besides, what do you say to somebody who's severely depressed? But she's expecting us, so we have to go. But I was really upset that they didn't ask me. They went ahead, they made the appointment, come into the apartment, and this woman, she was not among the living. There was absolutely no life in her. And she tells me the story. 19-year-old son died in a car accident. And it was Erev Rosh Hashanah. He was driving back from their country house to get back into town for Rosh Hashanah, and he didn't survive the accident. And she tells me what a great boy he was, how special he was. She finishes. What can I say? So I said, wow, you had such a kid for 19 years. That's something. She was not impressed. So I said, if you take away the shock, the shock, of course, is horrible. But if you take away the shock, imagine the Eibush that came to you and said, there's a boy who has to be born. He's going to live for 19 years. He's a very special soul, and I'm looking for someone to be his mother. No surprises. 19 years. And God comes to you and says, would you please be this boy's mother for 19 years? What would you have said? So I was sure that she would say yes. She says, absolutely not. So without thinking, I said, oh, So it's a good thing he didn't ask you. She started to cry. I mean, the way you're supposed to after a tragedy. And 20 minutes later, she was back among the living. She came back to life. Her eyes became, her voice, her skin. She pushed, Trias HaMesim. I saw a person go from not alive to alive. It was the most amazing, the most emotional, the most incredible experience. So now we're back in the car, going to the hotel room. And I'm thinking, I was so angry. Why didn't they ask me? You get it? And then I realized, if he had asked me, what would my answer have been? Absolutely not. Would have been the wrong answer. So it's so clear, it's so obvious. The shlichus, the purpose that we exist for, the reason our soul came down to earth for the 80, 90, 100 years that we live. It's because we want, because we were asked. We were not asked. And what happens during those years? God asks you. You want to have a little Mesiras Nefesh? Imagine if he asked. We would say absolutely not. You want to have a challenge in life? No, thank you. You want to go through some difficulties? We would say no to every good thing. Because what do we know? And it's not for us. So it's such a good thing that he doesn't ask us. He gives us a life, he gives us a mission, he puts us where he needs us to be, and he has more confidence in us than we have in ourselves. So for this coming year, we should realize that even when we're not ready, we're still out in the field, we're not dressed for Yom Tov, we don't feel Yom Tovdik, we're not ready to do tshuva, we're not inspired yet, but we want to be a good Jew. Everybody wants to be good. And this is so precious to the Eibishter, the fact that we want and don't know how. Tzoako hanayra ve'ein Mashiach. And the tza'aka is so precious that the king comes and says, I want you, I need you, you're welcome. So for us to hesitate and say, yeah, but I'm not dressed right, I haven't learned enough, I'm not so religious like my grandfather. That's for past generations. In past generations, it was sur mirah, and then asay tov. But if you don't stop sinning, then who inviting you to put on tefillin? Who invites you to come to shul? Today, those conditions are reversed. If asay tov, if you do what God needs, then the sur mirah will happen automatically. If you do what's godly and holy, then your little human faults, your little petty, it'll disappear. So it turns out that in the olden days, to do a mitzvah without thought of a reward was like the biggest tzaddik in the world. Today, it's the only way we know how. It's the only way. What kind of schar are we looking for? What kind of schar are we hoping for? So there's a chassid in Crown Heights. He's Kenai Nahar, 100 years old. And he is amazing. So not long ago, he said to his family, Chagahata Cholim, I had a dream. They came to me from heaven, and they said, we need you. We need a teacher. So I said, you need a teacher? There's a shortage of teachers in Gan Eden? And they said, who's talking about Gan Eden? We need a teacher in Gehenna. So they came for me, that I should be a teacher in Gehenna. He's laughing at himself. 100 years old. Is he going to Gan Eden? Is he going to Gehenna? That's not even an issue. The issue is, what did you accomplish? Not for yourself, for the purpose that you were born. L'shamish eskoini, ani, Gehenna, Gan Eden. What's the difference? That's not what the world hangs on. And as long as we're telling jokes, I gotta tell you this. His leg was hurting about a year ago. So he went to a doctor. The doctor examines him and says, listen, what can I tell you? You're getting old. He says, doctor, the other leg is exactly the same age. And it doesn't hurt. So don't give me this Maisa with age. So then he tells a story that there were two chassidim that he remembers. His memory is quite good. And he was upset that he didn't remember their names. But anyway, he remembered these two chassidim. They were best friends, older, and one of them was dying. And he said to his friend, is there a minyan? Because, it's special to have a minyan by Yitzias. He said, is there a minyan? So his friend said to him, I can't believe it. You lived your whole life arrogant. You have to die arrogant also. Starb Gesundheit und mach nicht kein Tummel. Die in good health and don't make a big deal about yourself. It's so important that we get past ourselves. 5,000 years, 3,000 years of Torah and mitzvahs, and it's still about me. How can that be? How can that be? It makes no sense. The whole thing, all the history, everything we've gone through, the incredible, ridiculous suffering and history, and it's all so that I should become better. So one final story. This father calls me from Eretz Yisrael. He says, I have a terrible problem. My daughter is 12 years old. Und so hat sich eingeredet that the Eibishter is angry at her. We took her to Rabbanim, we took her to psychiatrists, we took her to Mekubolim. Nothing helps. She's upset, she's depressed. God is angry at her. And then he did something I don't like because he didn't ask. He says, here, talk to her. And he puts her on the phone. I don't know him, I don't know her. So what can I do? So I said, you think God is angry at you? She says, yeah. I said, how did you become so important? She says, what? I said, you're 12 years old? You're 12 years old and you can do something to make the Eibishter angry? How did you become so important? I'm so jealous. Problem solved. Now she goes and tells her friends, Eibishter's angry at me. Not at you. You're not important. Even if the Eibishter is angry at us, you don't hear the compliment? How can it be? How did we become so important that after 3,000 years of Mesiras Nefesh, 3,000 years of incredible Jewish history, and what's the whole point? The whole point is that I should become a better person. It just doesn't, it's not niskabel al hadas. What's happening is, we're in the generation of Ikvasid the Mashiach. Mashiach is about to come. The world is about to become normal. I can never say that with a straight face. What, you haven't read the papers? The world is becoming normal, no? The crazier it gets, of course, the more you realize you got to become normal. It can't be like this. So just before Mashiach comes, the emes me'eretz titzmach, the emes becomes obvious. You don't have to go to yeshiva, you don't have to be a godel, you don't have to be a genius. If the emes is revealed, then what can you say? What do you say when you hear emes? What do you say? When you hear chachma, you say, that makes sense. When you hear emes, what do you say? Amen. What does it mean? But what can you say to emes? Emes is emes. So, what kind of great character do you have to recognize that emes is emes? The reason we don't recognize it is because it's not revealed. It's hester ponim. The emes is not revealed. So we walk around thinking we know, and we have, everything is upside down. Light is dark and dark is light. Right is wrong and wrong is right. But once it becomes revealed, what kind of talent do you need to see that emes is emes? That's Mashiach. We're at a time now where the emes is going to become so obvious that it will be equally clear to the greatest of the great and the lowest of the low. And how will that happen? Because v'ro'u kol bosar yachdav. There'll be no difference between the greatest of the great and the smallest of the small. V'ro'u kol bosar yachdav. How will they see? Not because they became smart, but because emes is emes. You don't need any talent for that. So we, who know a little bit the emes, how could it be about me when I know what's emes? How could it be for my benefit, for my purpose, how can my failings, my shortcomings, my shtick, how can that get in the way of doing a mitzvah? The Baal Shem Tov insisted that all Jews are equal. How is that? How are all Jews equal? This one is a Godel Shabbat, and this one is the Kotan Shabbat. How are all Jews equal? It doesn't mean that all Jews are equally talented, equally smart, equally edel. No, of course not. When it comes to fulfilling what the Eibishter needs, we're all equal. And now is a time for fulfilling what the Eibishter needs. So now is the time to see all Jews as being equal. I mean, what does it take to make a cup of coffee? Whatever the Eibishter needs, it's not complicated. It's not difficult. No requirements necessary. This is the mitzvah. You do it without thought of a reward, because today there really is no reward. You're going to get covered. If you do a mitzvah, you'll get covered. You'll get criticism. If you do a mitzvah, you're going to get rich. We know. There's only one reason for a mitzvah. It's Rotzen Hashem. And we are here to serve Him. I think it's an important message for any time, particularly for the month of Elul. We should make a bracha, thanking the Eibishter for not asking us, for not waiting for us to become talented and holy. He gave us the mitzvahs when we knew nothing, when we had no talents. In a desert, which means all people equal. Now it's time to complete the job. So whoever you know, at any time, wherever you are, there's a mitzvah waiting. Don't hesitate. I was talking to a guy and he says, I don't know, I have no yiras shamayim. I walk into a shul, I don't belong there. I don't belong there. So he's thinking of not coming to shul anymore. I said, that would be a very big mistake. Most people in shul don't belong there. If you're going to start with these cheshbonos, who does belong there? They're not going to have a minyan without you. those who belong there. And besides, you just realized that now, that you don't belong there. I knew this about you a year ago. What do you mean you don't belong there? If the Eibishter asks you to come and talk to Him, what does it mean you don't belong? Who decides who belongs? So it's really freedom. It's freedom from concern about myself and am I big, am I small, am I right, am I wrong? You're wrong. What's the question? You're wrong. But it's not about you. It's about the mitzvah. So if you do the mitzvah, it is perfect. You're not. So it does not make the mitzvah less perfect. So we should all have a ksiva v'chasima tova. We should have a year in which the Eibishter gets what he needs. That should be our resolution, our hachlata for this year. The Eibishter should get what he needs. What I need, no. We'll manage without. A good year.
Shem Irgen Shira Torah Moses Boston